Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really tough question, aren't we?
We are. It's about why people stay, why they remain in relationships that are clearly toxic.
Exactly. And we've got this great discussion we're drawing from that digs into what these relationships actually are and, the really deep psychological stuff that makes leaving seem, well, almost impossible.
hmm It's complicated.
Our aim here is really to give you, our listeners, a clearer view of these dynamics. We want to go beyond just definitions and look at the why, the conditioning, the fear, the emotional ties that keep people stuck.
Yeah, because that question, why don't they just leave,
Yeah.
comes up so often. And the source we're exploring today, it offers some really crucial insights. It's about understanding the underlying mechanics, really, approaching it with empathy.
Okay, let's dive in then. First off, what makes a relationship toxic? It's more than just having arguments sometimes, right?
Oh, absolutely. Not just the odd fight. Our source really stresses it's about a consistent pattern, a pervasive pattern of negative behavior.
Like, what kind of behavior are we talking about?
Well, things like manipulation,
Yeah.
maybe using secrets against someone, or just constant criticism, that drip, drip, drip that wears you down.
Making you feel guilty for things that aren't your fault.
Exactly. Guilt tripping, emotional abuse, and sometimes, sadly, physical abuse too. It's a pattern.
And the effect of all that negativity, it must go deeper than just feeling a bit low after a row.
Absolutely. The source points out that over time, it leads to feeling constantly drained, just exhausted, or deeply insecure about yourself, about the relationship.
And even fearful.
Yes, even fearful of your partner, of their reactions. It fundamentally chips away at your sense of well-being.
Okay, so knowing that,
Mm.
why is it so hard to walk away? The source talks about something called trauma bonding. Sounds kind of paradoxical.
It really does. And it's a powerful concept the source unpacks. Trauma bonding.
Mm.
It's this intense psychological connection, right? But it forms through this cycle, this intermittent mix of affection and then abuse.
So good times mixed with bad times.
Precisely.
Mhm.
But the cycle means you become almost conditioned to crave those moments of love, the good parts. And in chasing those highs, you tend to minimize or even ignore the bad stuff.
Wow.
The source actually calls it almost like an emotional addiction. You're hooked on those intermittent rewards.
That paints a really clear, if difficult, picture. You're just chasing that validation. Now, another thing the source mentions is low self-esteem. How does that keep someone trapped?
Well, think about it. If you're constantly being put down or criticized,
Hmm.
the source explains that people can start to internalize all that negativity. They might begin to believe deep down that they actually deserve to be treated poorly.
That's heartbreaking. Where does that come from usually?
It can have roots way back, maybe childhood experiences or damaging past relationships. It builds up this sense of shame or feeling unworthy.
And if you feel worthless.
Then the toxic behavior doesn't seem so shocking anymore. It might even start to feel normal or expected,
Mm,
which is just tragic.
it really is. The source also brings up a really basic human fear,
Yeah.
just being alone.
Yeah, and this taps into both personal psychology and, frankly, societal pressures too.
How so?
Well, loneliness is a huge fear for many people. The source highlights how that fear can be a massive driver for staying put, even if the relationship is harmful.
Because being in any relationship feels better than none.
Sometimes that's the underlying thought, yeah. Society often pushes this idea that being partnered is the goal, right? So there can be this subtle or not so subtle feeling that a bad relationship is better than facing being single.
That's a tough one to grapple with. Then there's hope that maybe things will get better. Maybe they'll go back to how they used to be.
Hope. Yeah, it's such a double-edged sword in these situations. The source really nails this. Remembering the good times, oh, but they weren't always like this. That acts like a powerful anchor.
Keeping you tethered.
Exactly. Plus, think about the investment. All the time, the energy, the emotion you've poured in. You desperately want to see a return on that investment. You want things to improve.
And the toxic partner might even play on that hope.
Oh, definitely. They can be very clever at giving just enough kindness, those little crumbs of affection, intermittently. It keeps the person hooked, hoping this time it'll stick.
Keeps the cycle going. But sometimes it's not just psychological, is it? There are practical barriers, too.
Absolutely crucial point the source makes. Financial dependence or situational dependence.
Like needing the partner for money or a place to live.
Yes, a very real reliance for basic needs. Housing, food, money. That creates huge tangible obstacles to leaving. Or things like immigration status being tied to the partner.
Making leaving feel genuinely impossible from a survival standpoint.
Exactly. The fear of the practical consequences of how you'd even survive can be overwhelming.
It just shows how incredibly complex these situations are.
Okay, so the source also talks about red flags, those early signs that maybe get missed. What should people look out for?
Yeah, spotting them early is key, though often hard in the moment. The source lists several important ones. Constant criticism is a big one. Or those little belittling remarks that just chip away at your confidence. Feeling like you have to walk on eggshells.
That's another huge one. Feeling anxious or actually scared to say what you think, that shows there's no real safety or respect.
What about being cut off from people?
Yes, isolation. If your partner tries to cut you off from friends or family, that's a major warning sign. And of course, manipulation tactics trying to control you, making you feel guilty all the time.
And gaslighting. That term comes up a lot. What exactly is that, according to the source?
It's particularly insidious. The source describes gaslighting as things said or done to make you doubt yourself, your own memory, your perception of reality, even your sanity.
Wow, that sounds incredibly disorienting.
It is. It undermines your trust in your own judgment, which makes it even harder to see the relationship clearly, let alone leave it. And one more key thing the source mentions,
What's that?
a total lack of accountability. The partner never takes responsibility, never apologizes, always blames someone else. That consistent refusal to own their behavior is a really bad sign.
Okay, so recognizing these flags is step one, but getting out, actually breaking that cycle, that sounds like the really hard part. What does the source suggest there?
It lays out a kind of roadmap, which is really helpful. First off, awareness, just recognizing and naming the relationship as harmful. That might come from, learning more, maybe therapy, or just honest talks with people you trust.
Building support seems vital.
Absolutely critical. Leaning on friends, family, maybe finding support groups, online communities, talking to professionals. You need that emotional backup. And sometimes practical help, too.
And if there's actual abuse involved, safety planning is essential.
Non-negotiable, the source emphasizes. If there's danger, you need a concrete plan. That could mean saving money secretly, knowing where you could go, maybe getting legal advice about your options. It's about protecting yourself.
What about healing afterwards?
Therapy or counseling is often really key there. Dealing with the emotional damage, rebuilding that self-worth that got eroded, and then boundaries.
Setting firm limits.
Yes, very clear, firm boundaries. And often, the source points out, going no contact, completely cutting ties with the toxic person is a necessary step to truly heal and stop the cycle.
This whole conversation really just highlights how important it is to talk openly about toxic relationships, doesn't it? The source material seems to suggest that silence lets shame grow.
That's a really powerful takeaway. Open dialogue challenges that shame, that isolation people feel. When we understand these dynamics better as a society, we can offer real empathy and support,
Yeah.
not just judgment or easy answers like, just leave.
So for anyone listening right now, if this deep dive has struck a chord, if any of this sounds familiar from your own life, please take this message from the source to heart. You aren't weak. You're not broken. And you are definitely not alone in this.
Absolutely. Healing can happen. Healthy relationships are possible. Everyone deserves peace, respect, and love, without harm.
And maybe one last thought to leave people with, something the source prompts us to consider. What about the subtle messages in our society? About relationships, about sticking it out, about forgiveness? Could some of those messages, even unintentionally, make it harder for people to recognize toxicity or feel okay about leaving?
That's a really important question. What are those unspoken rules or expectations we absorb about relationships that might actually inadvertently keep people trapped? Something definitely worth thinking about.